Perfect. Thank you very much, Cynthia. I appreciate that. We'll go ahead and start in a moment. But yes, so please let me know where you're at. Let everybody know where you're at in the chat. Feel free to do that. You can pin my video or the presentation, so it's easier for you to follow along. Just hit those 3 little dots and you can pin and unpin the speaker or the content. And if you have any questions throughout the talk today, please feel free to interrupt and ask me. I will do my best, like I said, to monitor the chat. But if you have something you want to ask while there is a slide up, by all means, let me know. So we'll go ahead and get started. All right, make sure. Here we go. Okay, so before we begin, I did want to tell you a little bit about myself and why I am here speaking to you all. So again, Jessica, based in Denver, Colorado. Prior to Apogy, which I started back in 2019, I was leading clinical strategy and innovation for a healthcare company called DaVita. And when I started at DaVita, I actually started in 2010 as a change manager. But that was the last time I held that title in the organization. I went from IT strategy to operations to clinical programs and strategy. And in every single role, I used change management to help me be more effective in what I was doing, to help me get my ideas and my solutions to people. And because of that, because of my experience using change management successfully, I wanted to share that with others because I believe it is not only a great business skill and practice, but anybody in any role, if they understand the concepts and the thinking, they're going to just be more effective in any position, really. My interests, I love spending time with my family. I am married to my college sweetheart. I have 2 young boys and I teach yoga on the side. I actually started taking yoga classes when I was working in the corporate environment as a way to reduce stress. So maybe some of you who have joined this conversation are right there with me in terms of using exercise as a form of stress management. And I love teaching it to this day because it really embodies that mind-body connection and just makes me feel a lot better and helps me show up in the best ways in every area of my life. And then my why for doing this. Learning is life-changing. I don't know about you, but I have really enjoyed, and maybe this is why you're here and at this conference, learning new things, whether it's getting certified in something or going back to school or just listening to podcasts. I find that consuming information is not only super fulfilling, but I just love being able to try out new skills that I have learned along the way. About Apogy. So Apogy, we are a training and consulting firm. We offer change management training and certification. We have coaching that goes alongside with it. I'm really excited to announce we're going to be launching a strategic change leadership program coming up that includes on-demand courses plus expert level coaching so people can learn quickly the information and then get direct feedback from somebody who has been there, done that, and then be more, be able to implement the information in real time, which is really exciting. What makes Apogy different is both our approach and our philosophy. So we use a lean learning approach, which means we give you the core of what you need to know so you can go out and more quickly implement what you have learned in terms of the information that we provide in the courses. And then our philosophy, so Apogy was founded on the basis, and this is where it ties in with the presentation, that employee well-being is really key to delivering business results. So when organizations, when they prioritize well-being, they can build sustainable, resilient companies that not only do right by employees and customers, but then they can profitably fulfill their potential. So that is why we integrate well-being into our training and consulting services. So it's going to help reduce stress, increase resilience, and then help people develop a growth mindset, which is necessary, as you know, for business change and innovation to succeed. So we're going to do something a little bit different, and I hope you will just follow along with me. We're going to do a brief reset, a brief pause to prepare for today's learning. So if you're in Denver, it's 4 p.m., maybe you're in a different time zone on the East Coast or on the West, or you're calling in from somewhere international, but we're going to just take a moment and recalibrate. So just taking a moment to pause and breathe or meditate, it's a really great way to help calm your mind and your body somebody from Australia, very cool. And it also helps to create space in your mind so you can allow new ideas, new ways of thinking to come in, and also remember what you've heard. So everyone, just start by sitting up straight in your chair and uncross your legs and rest your feet on the floor. Place your hands in your lap. So you can have your palms facing down if you want to ground down, or you can have your palms facing up if you need a little bit more energy. And then close your eyes or soften your gaze and start to breathe in and out of your nose. And just start by observing the natural flow of your breath. I want you to use this opportunity to quiet your mind and let go of any thoughts that may be popping up. Just allow yourself to arrive completely in the present moment. On your next inhale, breathe in for 4 counts. So it's inhale for 4, 3, 2, 1. And when you exhale, do so out of your mouth for 8 counts, like you're blowing out of a straw. So good, let's do this together. Inhale for 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale for 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. One last time. Inhale for 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale for 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Nice job. So you can blink open your eyes. Hopefully you feel a little bit recharged, maybe more calm, your body's slowed down a little bit, and you're ready for learning. So let's go ahead and begin. I can get my pointer to work. Okay, so well-being as a strategy for change, initiative, success. For some reason, my slides are not progressing. Hopefully you can see them. Here we go. Oh. Okay, so if you joined this conversation by looking at the agenda, you are somewhat familiar with what we're going to be talking about. So as you know, change is difficult in a normal business environment. And the pandemic has really accelerated and exacerbated really the pace of change, which has forced employees to rapidly change and adapt. And of course, that has been necessary for business survival, but change fatigue is real. And so your role as a change leader is to empower people to successfully change. You play a key role in shaping the employee experience, which is a key driver of business success. And I have some data points to share with you later on in the presentation that will help you understand the correlation here. And so maybe you've been hired to fix the situation, or you're responsible for overseeing the delivery of multiple strategic imperatives. You know that people are stressed out, you know they're unhappy, maybe you're in the same boat. That makes a very difficult starting point, which makes it so much harder to achieve success, and things can slow down, morale is affected, good people leave. You kind of know the story, right? So my goal today is to equip you with information so you can better articulate the benefits for introducing well-being, the risks for ignoring stress, and then also give you a few ideas on how you can change your approach so you can incorporate well-being and start to contribute at a higher level in your organization. So key goals here: understand how stress impacts people and organizations. We're going to talk about well-being as a strategy for change initiative success. And then we are going to learn a few things about how to deliver a holistic approach to change management. All right, we've got some arrows flying around over here by Paulette. Okay, so before COVID even happened, stress was called by the World Health Organization the health epidemic of the 21st century. There's been some research that shows how stress affects worker health. And I guess Stanford did a research study. They found that it led to about 190 billion healthcare costs and almost 120,000 deaths per year. And we'll get into how that happens with the impacts of stress on the brain and on the body. And so that's a pretty scary statistic. It's also scary because that was our starting point, right? We were entering 2020 with already an issue. The baseline wasn't great. And then this global pandemic happened, and COVID-19 introduced whole bunch of new stress factors at work and at home. It's crept into all of the ways we live, the ways we consume, even our politics. And last year for many people was traumatic and certainly stressful for most. Oh, there we go. So the data, oops, the daisies. So the data here, and this is from different workforce studies, almost everyone is feeling stress. And then almost a third, almost 40% of people are feeling stress that is unreasonably high, which means they are getting close to that point of breakout. And in 2019, the World Health Organization recognized burnout as a health condition due to chronic workplace stress. So when people are stressed out, they're more likely to leave, like retention becomes an issue. They're more likely to take days away from work due to being sick physically, mental health days. And because it does impact your body and your brain, there are risks to your overall health status, and you're more likely to visit the hospital due to stress-related issues. And that's scary, that's a problem. There we go. So what are some of the top reasons why people experience stress at work? This is based on a survey that Gallup did. I believe it was in an article recently, but it was back in 2019. And this is probably not a surprise to anyone. And yes, I will share my slides. Yes, sorry, I'm just checking the comments. And these are reasons why people feel stress at work. Again, probably not a big surprise here. I'm sure we've all been in this boat, not knowing kind of what our role and responsibilities are supposed to be at times, really feeling the pressure of deadlines and due dates, and also frequent change and disruption, whether it is big changes, transformational changes, or small incremental changes. It all adds up, right? It all becomes just something that takes up mind share and space, and that can be really difficult for new things, new ideas, new perspectives, and ways of working to be possible. Let's take a look at how the pandemic has driven change in the workplace. So over 90% of organizations have had some sort of shift to their business model as a result of what has happened from the pandemic. So again, corporate, people have moved to remote working. Retail mostly has gone online. Fitness industry has been impacted. There's a limited capacity in gyms and studios. There's the proliferation of virtual classes and fitness apps. Education and higher learning, transition to remote learning in many states. Travel, health and beauty, restaurants, healthcare, everything has been affected. And so organizations have modified how they operate in order for employees to continue to work and for them to be able to meet the needs of customers, the evolving needs of customers. And then we'll take a look at the impact on business priorities. It's also shifted those. So some of the top priorities for 2021, companies want to continue to build on the use of digital and collaboration tools. We saw with that shift to remote work, more and more organizations were utilizing platforms like Zoom and other ways to ensure employees could stay connected and get work done. Please clear trash cans, sorry. Okay, let me see if I can do this. Hold on a second, clear. Thanks for the tips, everyone. There we go. Okay, good deal. Thank you, Annette. All right. So again, so we saw this shift to remote working, which has influenced what companies are prioritizing as we move into this year. And maybe some of this was already planned last year, but has really made it an even bigger priority, higher on the agenda list. Organizations are also thinking differently about their global supply chain. We saw with the different impacts in not only the United States, but other areas where they get their where they get what they need to provide the products and services was impacted by all of the disruption. And then one of the top priorities is reducing talent risks. And what that means is with the shift to remote working, it has not only created more opportunities for people to work in different locations and not necessarily have to be based where the company is headquartered, but that applies to the United States and global. So now we've got more competition, not only for jobs, but to keep really good people. And then for those organizations that had limited resources or just in general upskilling and reskilling talent and providing, so they've got the capabilities that are necessary to be adaptive and flexible with all this change. Those are some of the top priorities that organizations have this year at least. Okay, let me see if I can do this. Give me a second. There we go. Okay. So what does this mean? I'm a visual person, and so I like to kind of lay this out and just how I've been thinking about change and the impact of change and stress on people. So before COVID, companies had lots of different priorities, change initiatives that were in the queue. COVID-19 happened. Some of these initiatives were put on pause. Some of them were continued because it continued on with the strategic imperatives. Others were stopped and the new ones were added. And all of this was done as a means of survival or to take advantage of opportunities that weren't as significant as before. So we've got a year of experience under our belt. There's a lot of confusion in the early part of the pandemic because we just didn't know what it was. We didn't know how long it was going to last. We didn't know how it, just so many things were unknown, but we've got a lot more experience. We've got a vaccine now as well. So now you've got initiatives that are being pulled off the shelf and put back in the queue, and then even more change that is coming down the pike. So what this means is before you had stress, and then you have a little bit more stress, and then now you might be feeling like, oh my goodness, I need a minute. So that's how I've been sort of thinking about what's happened over the past year. Let's talk about the science of stress. So stress can have a huge impact on our brain and can put us at risk for a number of physical and physiological and psychological problems. So repeated stress is a major trigger for persistent inflammation in the body. And studies show that it can adversely affect brain systems that are linked to memory and motivation and cognition, and it can also interfere with our ability to balance between kind of rational and emotional thought. So for example, if you all recall, when the news of coronavirus was spreading, people went out and were hoarding hand sanitizer and toilet paper because there was just so much fear that was impacting, creating more stress, right? It also releases hormones into our body, and that can have an impact on our immune system, which can lead to greater likelihood of getting sick. It can increase your blood pressure, which can impact your cardiovascular health. So tons and tons of data that shows frequent, chronic, unmanaged stress is really, really unhealthy for us as humans. And I think if anything, this past year has really, again, made this even more of an issue than it was before, because we've just had so many new things have happened. Change and disruption is stressful as it is. Change and disruption due to a pandemic and all the different kind of ripples that has created is even more, is scary stuff. So how does this impact people at work? Well, of course, people are going to have a harder time focusing. And honestly, stress and anxiety are kind of the most common issues at work. And many people feel that their work is kind of the most stressful part of their life. In fact, workplace stress, it's estimated to cost the economy about $500 billion a year. And that equates to about 550 million lost work days due to stress on the job. So you'll see people, not showing up. You'll have people that are showing up, but they aren't being as productive. You'll have retention issues. And really what this means for you as people who are leaders of change, agents of change, is that people are not going to be in the orientation of being open and receptive to change. They're going to be more resistant. And then there's a direct impact on companies too. So when people are stressed out, it's going to impact their performance, which impacts company performance. So staff turnover forces many companies to put more time and money into hiring and training new employees. It can affect peer relationships. People have difficulty interacting with their peers or their supervisors or the people on their team. That can result in poor decision-making or stalled decision-making. It can result in errors. And then it also just leads to poor productivity and performance. And so that shows up in the quality of service, that shows up in the quality of product. And when that happens, people aren't going to want to buy the services or product, and ultimately impacts how well an organization can perform. So In the chat, if you can, do you agree that workplace stress is, or at least should be, an organizational responsibility? Or if you'd like to share any comments or observations. I got a couple yeses. A lot of yeses, a lot of absolutelys. All right, seems like we're all on the same page with that. Yep, I saw one about stress is systemic. Organizations have a difficulty. They don't want to take responsibility. Shared responsibility. I agree with that too. Yep, a lot of good comments here. Some saying shared, mostly shared. Yep. Okay. Oops. Let me fix this. Ooh. Okay, we'll keep going. Thank you for responding. Combination of work outside of moments. Yep. Okay. So let's talk about well-being as a strategy for change initiative success. So I have a quote here, and this is from, I'll share with you in a second. Got to fix my, sorry, again, flying solo here, so trying to manage on multiple screens. This is from Tom Rath. He's an author and expert on employee engagement, strengths and well-being. And really kind of the net takeaway here is that it includes having good physical and mental health, high life satisfaction, a sense of meaning or purpose, and the ability to manage stress. And so his mindset, and I agree with it, and maybe some of you here agree with it too, is that we all really need to be in the business of improving health and well-being for our customers, for our employees, for the communities in which they operate, because that is how we will end up building sustainable companies. And it could also fix this global epidemic of poor health and stress, because our workplaces are really some of the largest and most influential in our lives. So if you think about well-being, it's sort of like a pyramid. It assumes, or your basic needs have to be met. So that includes having access to housing and transportation and food and healthcare. That's the foundation. Once you have your basic needs met, then you sort of move up the period. And I'm referring to kind of where we're going next is health indicators. And it's not limited to physical health and wellness. It can include mental health and social health and connection, relationship to money, to your economic security. And when you start to have more balance here and more positive outcomes here, that's when you lead to fulfillment, life satisfaction. The way that, individual health indicators, so here we go, we've got physical, mental, emotional. Physical obviously being, do you have enough energy to do what you want during the day? Do you have good physical health? Mental and emotional health, are you able to handle stress? Are you overwhelmed? Spiritual really refers to, do you find meaning in the work that you do? Do you have a sense of purpose and connection to something bigger in your life? Financial is that, do you have enough money to do the things that you want? Social and relationships are very big too. Do you have strong relationships in your life and at work? Do you take pride in your community? And then career health. Do you like what you do? Are you satisfied with how you spend your time? Do you have a sense of accomplishment? And truthfully, not all of these are really within the control of a company or an organization. That being said, organizations and leaders and teams can provide employees with access to information and resources that can steer them in the direction of kind of taking care of what they need to in order to make sure this is more in balance and positive versus negative. So how this shows up in terms of work, if you think about that kind of basic foundation, employees have access to what they need to do their jobs. They've got safe working conditions. Then you've got that middle tier. Do employees feel valued? Do they feel supported? Can they perform at their best? Which means, their stress levels are manageable. The company celebrates trust and belonging and inclusion. And so it's an environment that is conducive for learning, which can lead to growth. And then ultimately that top tier is both employees and organizations can fulfill their potential and profitably fulfill their potential. So factors that affect well-being at work, obviously all the health indicators that we just went through, and a couple more. You've got too much on your plate, toxic dynamics at work, external things that are happening at home, within the world, and obviously frequent change and disruption. That's kind of the key theme here of what can affect our well-being. And the pandemic has certainly affected every part of our lives, right? Maybe you have been impacted by COVID personally, or have loved ones that have been impacted. The ways in which we shop and consume, special events, birthdays, weddings have been canceled. Shops have closed down. Places that we visit, that we care about, small businesses, big businesses, working from home. Our kids are remote, learning as well. This has created stress for so many people, just because it's been such a huge change. And again, even how we take care of ourselves has evolved. And so all of this just adds up. It adds up. It's new. It's different. And it's a lot for us to kind of be where we were at, and then where we are now. And if organizations and leaders are not thinking about stress and well-being into the equation as they move forward into this year, I think some of the impacts of stress at work that we saw before will absolutely carry through into this year, and probably get even worse. I'm going to take a quick look at some of the comments just to see if I'm tracking along with questions. Combination of work outside life is enormous. Agreed. Political polarization adds fear. Universal healthcare would help as well with stress. Totally agree. I do think, though, and maybe many of you agree with this as well, that mental health has been brought to the forefront in a way that wasn't as it seems different this year. That it's more of a safe conversation versus something that has historically been a little bit, for whatever reason, people have been less comfortable expressing mental health needs. And so I think that although it has exacerbated those for many, it's also pushed it as a topic that is more common versus not than it was before, and that's a good thing. So how this has impacted our lives, our ways of working and living, it's also impacted our priorities as employees. And you can see here that there is a disconnect in terms of executives and employees prioritizing well-being as part of like what needs to happen in the coming year. And there's a reason for that. And it's because leadership often underestimates, as many of you are probably well aware, the impact of change on employees. And here's why. The higher up you are in an organization, the more control you have in terms of decision making and how you spend your time. And perhaps your time is limited because you've got a lot on your plate, but you definitely have more control than, say, someone at the analyst level who is an executor, an implementer of change, directly impacted by the change. And so not having any sort of control over stability really makes it harder for the people that are kind of down the chain. And now you've got, and there are studies that show millennials, young professionals, and women, in fact, are disproportionately affected or impacted by stress. They have more stress, it's more significant and more often. And that's one of the reasons for the disconnect. And I think, again, everything that has happened this year is giving us an opportunity, and by us, I mean change leaders, people who are leading change initiatives and projects and learning and development teams and project managers, an opportunity to have conversations that maybe were discarded prior to 2020. So let's talk about the science of well-being, because there's a lot of data here too that shows including well-being into the design of work can actually benefit individuals and companies. And well-being isn't a new conversation. It's been around for several years, but because of the pandemic, has been pushed to the forefront in terms of importance. In fact, it was on the rise in terms of a trend, an organizational trend and agenda before the COVID-19 pandemic, but it just pushed it to the top of the priority list because the speed with which organizations changed and kind of where employees worked and the resources that they needed to continue working, the conversation had to be had. And this data, there's actually several organizations that have researched the direct impact on the bottom line, but ultimately When employees feel that their well-being is a priority, it improves, and there are steps taken to support that, their experience improves, which, and employees who have a better experience with their organization, they're going to be more creative and collaborative and more strategic thinkers, and there's going to be better decisions happening, and the quality of the work is going to be maintained. And that's why you see these data points here, that for those organizations that are in the top 25%, they are just outperforming those organizations that are not prioritizing well-being as part of work life. So here are a few ways that companies are prioritizing well-being and integrating it into work. So obviously remote working, well-being, that was meant to keep people physically safe from the COVID spread. Benefits have been enhanced, and these are things that have happened and that have been noted as sort of top actions moving into 2020 or into this year. So more child care and elder care supports, extended leaves of absence, access to resources. Again, mental health has kind of risen up in terms of getting support for people and access to care there. More flexible schedules, giving people more control over when and where and how, when and where they work so they can be most productive. Job redesign, a workspace redesign, but particularly, giving people remote opportunities, part-time opportunities, just project-based opportunities. And then really, this has translated into how can we modify the culture? What can we infuse into the culture to make sure people know it is okay, if we are offering these things, to take advantage of them, and that our leaders are kind of modeling the behaviors that are necessary to support this transition, so we don't continue to burn people out and not experience the results that we're hoping to experience from the projects that we're rolling out the door. When I worked in the healthcare space, we had really smart people working on a lot of great ideas and innovations, and the best solutions can fall flat if people are not ready and open and willing to change, if they've got too much on their plate. And so this is, I think, a good wake-up call for leaders and teams to really think critically about how do we approach innovation, change, transition, transformation moving forward. All right, another poll. Do you agree that well-being is an organizational responsibility? So versus being, just an individual responsibility. And I think where this is coming from, for me at least, is when I think about well-being in the past, it was opt-in programs, fitness memberships, healthy snacks, maybe you'd get a service day. And now I see it as something that it has always been much bigger than that, but now there's an opportunity for, again, us as change leaders to really reinforce that it starts upstream, that there is something that leaders and organizations can do differently to help reduce and improve, or to help reduce stress and improve well-being. So let's take a look. We've got limited, but yes, it's both. For staff members who physically are on the floor, what would you recommend? We work in a museum setting and we have to staff 24/7 in terms of well-being. Now, Stephanie, are you referring to well-being or in terms of stress reduction? Both, really. Work to have to support employees, shared, increase loyalty, partially. Employees need to be involved and invested. Organizations need to provide resources. Yep. Absolutely. Got create health habits. Very cool. Okay. All right. Thank you for the comments there. So it seems like yes, and is the answer. That, and I do agree with that, that there is responsibility, because some of those health indicators that we discussed earlier, you can, this is probably a crude way of thinking about it, like lead a horse to water, but you can't force it to drink, or whatever that saying is. I think it's imperative that we give people access to tools and resources and support that expands their awareness of how they can best care for themselves. But there also is a responsibility not only to be a good corporate citizen, but also to sort of protect the well-being of employees where stress and overwhelm is clearly a problem. Okay, so let's talk about now how to update some of the tools, some of the ways that you think and approach change management to incorporate well-being. So this goes without saying, and again, I'm assuming some of you on the call are in dedicated change leadership roles, or maybe you're in different roles, but you understand this, but kind of really the purpose of change management is all about empowering people to successfully change, to accept and adopt and sustain whatever the changes are in the workplace. And it is our role and responsibility as change leaders to provide them with the right information and messaging and training and support so they can make the decision to change. And in order for this to happen, employees have to be willing to learn so they can adapt and perform at their best. So again, probably no surprises here, but factors that impact the transition phase. So that's the change, there's an event that occurs, there's this period where people have to sort of get on board with what's happening and then be successful in changing. There's a lot of reasons why they may go slower through that process. You've got kind of the benefits, right? The what's in it for me. Maybe they don't connect necessarily with the changes or doesn't support them. Maybe they enjoy or are happy with the way things are. They're overwhelmed. Their current capacity is already where it needs to be, or not needs to be, but it's just they're at their limit. The culture and the leadership doesn't reflect change, being adaptive to change. Maybe you've got executives who sort of kind of wait and see what happens and then move forward changes as they see fit. Yes, I've got a bad boss can impact everything. Absolutely, that can be a problem. And in the past, I think, as change leaders and as just leaders in an organization, the first four factors that impact the transition phase were kind of generally understood, and well-being, stress, was ignored. And in my experience, and maybe yours, stress was almost a kind of a badge, right? The amount of hours that you worked could kind of correlated with your promotability. And the reason for that, you've got companies that are benefiting from the amount of time that people are spending there and producing. So it was people, I think there's an awareness, but it wasn't something that was really, again, addressed and affected in the way that it is and should be now moving forward. Now, the correlation with well-being and change management, the core of every good change management and well-being program is behavior change, right? So you've got right knowledge and skills and motivation and support. So then you can change the behaviors that you have and get the results that you want, whether that's in terms of well-being or in terms of change management. And that's why I feel super passionate about having these, the integration of well-being into the role and responsibilities and toolkit of change managers moving forward. And how this can show up in terms of change manager or just change management roles and responsibilities. There's an opportunity here for change management for those who are leading change, whether you are in a department or an individual contributor or on a team that rolls out projects and programs. You can work across departments to ensure that well-being is factored into your change strategies and execution. So for example, partner with HR to make sure that different resources people are aware of the different resources that can support them during times of high stress, change, and challenge, right? Maybe it's employee assistance, maybe it's mental health support, whatever it might be. You can coach managers to model the behaviors. So exercise or physical, right? You can do a meditation. You can make sure there's times for those breaks in between meetings, whether it's a movement or a mental breaks. You can give people more autonomy and control over how and when they learn new information. You could connect with your IT team and figure out how to develop or use technology that not only tracks and manages employee well-being, but also links that, the outcomes to change initiative performance or company performance. And then if you're reporting out to executive leadership, you can ensure that you've got data points that talk about well-being, both quantitative and qualitative, how the changes are progressing, the employee experience, and the connection to business results. All right, so then we'll talk about the evolution of process and tools. And then I've got a question here. Would you hold the manager accountable for changing themselves to allow for a well-being culture? Absolutely. I think with any change, it's important to understand that you're being impacted by the change too. And, an idea, and I'll get into this actually in the next couple of slides, is this could be an opportunity to do some well-being training with our managers and leaders so they understand kind of the importance of well-being and how they can allow that to manifest within their teams and within the organization. So I think yes. And I would hold everyone responsible too. Yep, good stuff. Okay, so how this can impact your change process and tools. We'll start with assessments. So many of you, or some of you, hopefully are familiar with the different types of assessments that you can conduct as a change agent. And if your company is not currently measuring well-being, which many may not be, you may be familiar with engagement surveys or pulse surveys, and those have typically, there are different questions that are asked, and in my experience, they are absent of some of those well-being indicators. Are you feeling stressed and overwhelmed? Do you have the tools to support you? So you could work with your HR team to update those surveys. Or you can create your own, right? Get your own baseline data depending on the size of your organization or the size of your human resources department, and just create your own, kind of list of questions and assess how are employees doing right now. What is the starting point in terms of overall stress level and well-being? You can conduct interviews. You can call people. You can interview executives in the project team, get their take on how do they prioritize well-being and how are they doing so? And then interview employees who are going to be impacted by the changes, and really start to dig into, like, what are the issues here? What are we working with? And start to kind of map out different trends and potential opportunities to address those stressors, address their well-being before you continue to execute change. And then finally, and one thing that that I have done in the past is take a look at performance data. You can see where there are underperforming markets and regions, and take a look at what could be driving that underperformance. Now, there are certain things that are not necessarily within the organization's control, based on the kind of the customers, the consumers, the partners, and the providers. That being said, it can also be attributed to team dynamics, stress levels, lack of role clarity, not having the right working environment. So there's a lot of different ways you can assess well-being. And where this can show up is in some of the reporting mechanisms that change leaders use to communicate to their project team, to their leadership team on where, kind of what we're working with. One example is the organizational impact assessment. Now, there's lots of different versions of these that are sort of floating around. And so what you have in your organizational impact assessment may be different than what I have here. This is what I've created and used in the past, and I've added well-being as a factor. And again, this is a subjective form. It's a subjective evaluation. And the purpose is to create a conversation, to get alignment on the health of the organization. And you could, again, interview members of the team and others, but what this does is it sets that baseline and says, here's what we're working with. So there's your starting point is understood, and that will impact your change strategy, right? How much change management versus just your resources, your budgeting. So I think this is one way that you can start to incorporate well-being into your change management strategies and plans. The next one is the stakeholder impact assessment. Again, kind of a basic version of the tool here. You can add well-being into the evaluation. And so if you've got an employee stakeholder group with low well-being, what are the things that you can do or you can advocate for that can provide that group of stakeholders, of employees with with what they need to be successful, when changes occur and happen. And that obviously impacts readiness and buy-in and just overall adaptability to change. How this can show up in your change plans and tactics. When I think about change planning, and just based on experience and the training that I have received, there are really three major plans that you create. You've got your stakeholder engagement and management plan, you've got your communications plan, your training plan. There's lots of different frameworks and ways of thinking about this that go into developing what you end up planning, you know, all the tactics and strategies that you include, but how you can incorporate well-being into those is start with your sponsor, right? Coach the sponsors and leaders to emulate the behaviors that are most desired, right? Again, setting aside that time to give employees an opportunity to take breaks between meetings, to work where they want to work, to share information about benefits that are available. Even, you know, from a training perspective, calculate the training hours so they know how much time they need to build into their employees' schedules. And so they're not trying to do, you know, they're just being more thoughtful about how they approach whatever the change that is coming down the pike. So there's lots of little ways here that you can start to build well-being, integrate well-being into your work, your change management strategies and plans. And I'll include this slide in the handout that I send to participants after the session. And then this is really where I think change leaders, the role can adapt the most, and there's the most ability to positively influence and protect employee well-being. So when you think about change execution, there's obviously disruptive, that transformational change, incremental change, the little change ripples, right? All the little organizational shifts that occur, the updates that definitely take up mind space and create stress and disruption. This is where you as a change leader, you can take a look at all the different changes that are happening and start to help your team prioritize what needs to happen next. And one way to do that is by coming up with different measures. Again, this is something you can take a look at this slide and come up with your own if they don't necessarily fit for your unique business situation. But all the different changes that are happening, evaluate them across these various measures and then weight them. So then you've got a priority level for each change. There's a couple ways you can approach moving forward. You can prioritize certain changes based on their scores. You can create a monthly threshold and say no more than 500 points per month of change. And really what this does is, again, creates a conversation with your project team, with your executive leadership team, and it starts to, you're giving the people who are impacted by the changes an opportunity to really be successful, to take the necessary pause, to have the room to learn and grow, to avoid choosing their default, the least path of resistance, which is going back to the old ways of working. So you're doing your part as a change leader to give them the space, the time, the energy to do just that. And then one other tool that I really enjoy using, because again, visual person here, is a change initiative roadmap. So you can start to map out all the different changes that are happening. And what this does, and this is a great tool to use with your the people that are on your project team or leadership team, is you can work with others that are rolling out change as well and get this laid out. So then you can say, hey, these are all the things that are happening over the next. You can make this monthly, quarterly, whatever your time frame is. Here is where we see change collisions. Here's we see conflicts. Here's where a high stress time period is going to be because of the magnitude of changes that are happening. This is how this puts our projects at risk. This is how it's going to impact employees. So this is a way for you to share what you are, for a way for you to communicate in a way that has an impact on the people that you are working with, and maybe get them to think a little bit differently about the changes that they are hoping to make. And again, certain changes are a must do, right? Regulatory, safety, whatever those reasons are, it helps you think more critically and helps your team think more critically about prioritizing what happens when, just based on all the things that we've talked about. Okay, so in conclusion, and then I'll open it up for questions. Please let me know if you have any. I think it's clear in that there has been a disconnect for a long time, but still a disconnect in terms of prioritizing well-being and integrating that into work. And if we as change leaders can do that, we're not only going to improve the overall employee experience, but help develop, create an environment where employees can feel good and perform at their best and project, change initiative outcomes can be achieved because employees are better positioned to learn and have the time and energy to do just that. And after such a crazy year, and who knows what's going to happen this year, hopefully it's not like a repeat of last year. I think we're going to be doing the right thing as change leaders, as corporate citizens. And yeah, I think that's kind of where we'll wrap it up. Any questions, comments from people? Please unmute yourself if you feel so inclined, and we can have a little bit of a discussion. We've got some time built into the meeting to do so. Got some comments. I've been fortunate to work with leaders who understand the impact of change. Yep, employee assistant programs have been helpful. Any questions, comments? So let's see. Some more messages. Okay, Chantel, where are you at? Okay, here we go. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, Jessica, and hi, everybody. Thank you, Jessica, for sharing all of this. This is great. My question is, I wonder, I totally agree we need to consider well-being into change initiatives because we need people to have the energy, right, to undertake the change. I was wondering if what the organizations you work with so far have been responding to when you use well-being as a label, because my initial thought is it's one thing to integrate this as part of our thinking and approach and think about it, but do we actually need to put a label well-being to draw attention to that or not? And when you do, what's the reaction from the management, for example?
Yeah, it shows up in different ways. I mean, truthfully, some of the companies that I've been working with are actually more progressive in this area versus less. I've got one organization that I was working with there. They hadn't really thought about it. And I don't think the term scares people away, but it's definitely it encompasses a lot. And so it can encompass, very simple, small things like health and fitness programs, access to meditation apps, right? That's what people commonly think of. But well-being is so much bigger than that in terms of belonging and inclusiveness and diversity. And some of the more progressive or organizations that are thinking about this are already building that into their overall well-being strategy, because of last year prompted a lot of change there as well in terms of inclusiveness and diversity and belonging. So they sort of had a head start, and now, or not a head start, but they prioritized it. And now what's becoming is this, better picture of these are all the things that our employees think about and need to feel safe and supported and can be effective in their role. And it's no longer being viewed as these piecemeal programs. It's a more integrated picture. So in my experience, it's people are have been on that path, but the way that I think well-being gives them a common language. Is there something, are you seeing something different with the organizations that you are working with?
Well, not necessarily, but I tend, what I've seen so far is it's still something separate. They're putting together wellness programs, they have wellness strategies, but it's kind of a separate initiative, and probably they need to do that right now to draw attention to that. Mm-hmm. But I see in change initiatives that, yes, you could have this to help, but it needs to be integrated in the way you design the change and support the change. Like if you go too fast, if you don't have enough resources, then you're not in the first place. And then if they're your start and they're already exhausted and over their head, well, you need to take this into account anyway. So I don't think they've actually included well-being in change strategies, but I think it's a good approach when you actually draw attention or relate to their existing program, if they have one, to say, okay, where are your employees at and how can we maybe draw more attention to this to make sure they can sustain and participate in the change.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Thank you for that question and for sharing that.
Thank you, Jessica.
Are there any other questions, comments? Want to build on what Chantel maybe said? I see the messages. I'll check those out. We've got okay. We include for the risk assessment on the heat map. That's perfect. That's from Vanessa. So in terms of, there's a question about working with the client. So there's a couple of different ways that we work with the client. We like to teach a person to fish. And so a lot of our work is done training the people that work within the organizations to do change management and how they can be successful with their strategies and plans. But yes, we do have clients, and it's sort of a soup to nuts. You start, now the design of the change, like Chantel brought up, how do you integrate well-being into the overall design of the change, the solution? I have spent less time there, but in my work experience at DaVita, that was definitely a part of the conversation. And how can we make things easier, for the people that are going to be using the solutions that we were creating, and not, we're not creating duplicate effort, we're not creating duplicate workflows. And so I do have experience there, but Apogy in particular, it is more about, again, the training the people within the organization to be the leaders of change. But if there is a need, I have one client that I have helped with more of the strategic and tactical implementation. And that just, occurs for as long as the duration of the change, and it's sort of an ongoing process with that client. Did that answer the question, Sammy?
Yes, ma'am, it did. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, I can.
Okay. Hey, as we're talking about wellness, I'm not going to show myself because I'm on day 6 of isolation because my in-laws gave me COVID.
Oh no, I'm so sorry.
So guys, keep wearing your masks. Science is real. Managed 10 months living abroad and not getting COVID. 3 weeks back in America, COVID. No, but it's interesting. So I'm currently doing a master's in science and organizational consulting, and with a focus in change management through NYU. It's the inaugural class. So it's a brand new master's program. Exciting. And but I was thinking about just everything you were saying. I, a couple of years ago, worked for Google, which is very into OKRs, so objective key results, where everything rolls back up into your CEO. Like the CEO sets it, and then the next levels the CEO's key results become the next level's objectives. So that way everyone, and I was just thinking like that could be such an easy way to kind of sneak in the wellness, factor into it, because it's like, as I'm going after these key results, the way I'm going to manage my stress is like, you could almost just like add it right in, where people then, it's like helps then cement it because you write it down and you revisit it every quarter. And I was just trying to think of ways like, how could we like sneak this into bigger companies that already have processes in place for discussing goals, and could it just fit into the way they already write out their goals?
That's such a great idea. And I think that would be a wonderful way to do that, because then, to your point, you've got it sort of written down, and that's something you're being held accountable for, along with, whatever the performance objectives are. So that's a really neat way of thinking about it.
Hi, this is Pam. I just want to piggyback on that. I do think that is a wonderful way to do it, simply because, earlier in the slide set, you had how sometimes leaders, they sit at the top and they really get disconnected from what happens at the bottom. And sometimes they really just don't understand that those with the fingers on the keyboard and those who are out in the field doing the work, it becomes a huge disconnect from, where the leaders sit, for their lack of a better word, in their ivory towers. And I think sneaking it in this way will help them understand, because, you can sneak it in, but also have that conversation about what you're doing and why it's important. Help them on the journey with you. Take them on the journey with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that also creates an opportunity to even get, beyond before goal setting. How can you connect with the people that are going to be impacted by the changes most significantly, like the frontline employees, like you say, and start to design the changes in collaboration with that group. What do they need? What would make them more successful? What things could be improved? So not only from the change design, but to the goal setting and then everything in between. So I think there's, again, this is why I think that change leaders have such an play an important role and have such a huge opportunity to really transform from being, and maybe for many of you, you're already in this position where you're, ensuring that people have what they need to successfully change. Now you're the strategic advisor who is saying, this is how we should think about this, all the way upstream, and get engaged at that point in the conversation versus being pulled into a project when, project managers are preparing to roll it out. So I love that, Pamela. Thanks for sharing that.
One other thing that I just want to add, this is why I think a lot of those upfront surveys, like you talked about your readiness surveys and things of that nature, because, I've actually sat down with leaders and I've had the conversation and I've asked them, tell me what's your perception of how your people think, how are they feeling, what's going on? And then I present them with the real results and it's really eye-opening for them because they were like, oh, well, I had no idea. So, that's why I think having that conversation, but sneaking it in, just as you said, sneaking it in, it seems kind of, but I agree, putting it in there and then having that conversation and showing them the difference between how they think and feel versus how, your people who are truly impacted think and feel.
Yeah. I can imagine that was an eye-opening conversation just, because of the reasons of the disconnect. So I'm glad that you had a chance to incorporate that into your work and have had success there. That's great. All right, we've got a question from Angela. What strategies do you suggest if there are people within an organization that are bad actors and actively go against the change, which, as we all know, happens, right? Some people only care about themselves and don't care about the positive change. So, and I'd love to hear from people, on the call as well, what's worked for you. Truthfully, this is a really challenging because there's a couple of ways you can approach it. One, you can work directly with that individual and really understand what is the reason for the resistance, right? And there was a project where when I was working on the corporate side, we were completely restructuring the roles, the support roles that were out in the field. And this was a healthcare support role. And it had previously been a role that did a couple of different things to support clinic teammates. It was a clinical strategy, it was safety, and I forget what else it was. But we were saying, let's change the role and give you an opportunity to focus on doing just this or just this or just this. And it was, this one individual was so not happy with the changes. And when we dug into it, we realized that it increased her travel time. So she was spending more time in the car because she had to go visit more facilities. And so when you dig into it and understand what happened, like what is the key driver for the resistance, and this is, again, just one person that we spoke with, but then you can think, okay, is this person in the right role to support what's going to be coming down the pike in the future and how we want to shift the organization in terms of driving certain outcomes and supporting, again, patient or healthcare examples for patients. It gives you an opportunity to rethink some of the ways in which you've designed the change, right? You can't necessarily think of everything. You can do your best effort, but there are going to be things that come up when you're testing and piloting the changes that highlight, okay, this is something we hadn't been thinking about. And what happened was when we worked with this individual, we were able to make some shifts that impacted the broader group, and that person ended up being an advocate of what we were doing. Now, there are some people who just aren't going to change, and that's where you engage the sponsors, their managers, leadership, and in some cases, ideally you can put them in a different role, or it may be an opportunity for them to find something else. And that's worst case scenario, but that's been my experience. It's really understanding what is driving the resistance. And, there's a lot of different reasons why it can be there, but, sometimes it's surprising and for reasons that you don't expect, and that can help change the mind. And then that person can be, a winning champion for what you're doing. Anybody else have any experience with that and wants to share what they've done?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Carrie. So I'm actually very appreciative and supportive of what you're doing today, even though what I'm about to say may not sound like it. I've been working in this arena since 1979, I hate to say it. And working first with stress, total life stress, and then later working with deep change and transition. And what's frustrating is I'm always amazed at how much we know and how little we've learned. I mean,
right.
I could probably pull out a presentation of mine somewhere in the 80s, talking about these things and how important they are, and all the data that we had from inside a huge company, AT&T, when they were breaking up. I was studying stress when they broke up AT&T. I was inside. And so we've known so much about this and how important it is, and how many times we go through another cycle of something major like a pandemic, and we have to relearn and re-educate on issues that we know how important mental health, well-being, physical health, we know it's so important. And finding ways, whether it's like you said, sneaking in on some other link at senior levels, it's always seems like it's something like that is what it takes. Finding companies who really will seriously commit to people. It's frustrating to think about how few are willing to do that in these pivotal moments of change. So it's just a comment from long experience, I guess.
I agree with you. I haven't been doing this since the 1970s, but for a while now, and the environment, the workplace environment was just high stress, and again, almost like a badge of productivity and promotability. And the side effects, as everything you just said, I obviously am aligned with. I think, unfortunately, it does take something like this to propel this front and center, because of the horrible side effects that we're seeing in greater magnitude because of the pandemic. And I think it's sad that it's taken this, but I also think it's, again, an opportunity for us to I guess, capitalize on the momentum behind the well-being conversation that is happening more. It's louder than it has been in the past. And your example about, we've known this for a while, when and I may have mentioned this earlier in the presentation, but when I was telemedicine, again, great example. It was a conversation. We thought it would be a great thing to provide service to patients. We thought that it would be helpful, but there were so many things that were preventing it from being implemented. Fast forward a year, because of the pandemic, it's now, many healthcare providers are using it with success, and many patients are benefiting from it. So I do think it takes these difficult moments for us to kind of grow and learn and take all the information that we know to be true and apply it in a different way. So I agree with you, Carrie. I think that's a great, your spot, everything you've said makes sense to me, and hopefully this is the opportunity we've been waiting for to change the conversation and get the ear of companies and leaders. And I will say too, I work with a lot of just from a mentoring young professionals. I think young professionals are demanding a different way of working. A lot of college students, right? They want to work for organizations that are truly developing sustainable cultures, that are caring about the environment and social justice and all of those things. And so I'm hoping that not only does this change the trajectory of how organizations think about integrating well-being, but also that the people that are sort of pulling in behind us are going to continue to carry that torch in new and different ways that we haven't even thought of yet.
Yeah. Agreed.
Thank you for that thought, Carrie. That was really helpful. Any other comments? And thank you to everyone for joining. Several people have said they've had to go. I appreciate the time. I know it's late in the day for some, early for others, middle of the night for others as well. Any other final questions or comments? All right, wonderful. I will send out the key takeaways from this presentation to people who have joined. please feel free to reach out to me. My email is jesscrow, JESSCROW @Apogy, APOGY.biz. Would love to connect with you, in life and on LinkedIn. And thank you again. Have a great rest of your whatever time zone you are in, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thanks again.
Thank you.